I laugh occasionally because years ago I went to an astrologer,
Yeah.
and there have been different times when I've been really upset because no matter what I photograph, it's pretty beautiful. It's beautiful, old buildings, whatever. Uh, and she said to me, "Oh," she looked at this and your North Node and blah blah blah. And she said, "Oh, your job is to bring beauty into the world." And I said, "Oh, thank you," because I had been really upset about that. Um,
I love it.
so, so I think that that's my job.
I am in Borough-Lawrence, and I am thrilled to be here with L.A. Hyder, known to many as Happy. And I'm in Boston. She's in California. And I'm thrilled that she's with me today. And the purpose of this podcast series is really on behalf of a vision that I have, and I'm going to have Happy, L.A. Hyder, Happy. We're going to call you Happy. Is that okay?
Fine.
We're going to have Happy because I love it. Is really a world that works and honors and appreciates and celebrates each and every human being with no one and nothing left out. And a world in which people are known and appreciated and honored. And one of the big things that goes on in our conversations about the natural process that we all go through called quote unquote aging is there's so many biases and so much discrimination that goes on. And I say the biggest perpetrators of ageism are those of us that are on that trajectory. And chronological aging is absolutely inevitable, but deterioration, obsolescence, no joy, no satisfaction, no fulfillment, completely optional. We are truly the creators of our lives. And Happy is an extraordinary, extraordinary photographer. And I want to share a little. I love her bio. It is such an expression to me of who she is. Happy, L.A. Hyder, says, from my first real black and white film camera, bought in 1969, through my latest images in the digital age, which I also think is amazing. I'm interjecting to be able to be a photographer in the traditional sense and then pivot. That's all part of being creative. So we will definitely talk about that because I think that's really important that as the vehicles of media change, how do we as creators then adapt to the changes in technology that also become available to us? So from her latest images in the digital age, she works from a vision mentored by an earlier age of photography and now has honed through years of looking through a lens. As she says, I've done everything by the seat of my pants, taking, developing, printing my work, learning how a gallery runs with the Vida Gallery Collective at the San Francisco Women's Building in the mid-'80s, founding and directing LVA, Lesbians in the Visual Arts, an international organization from 1990 to 2003, writing personal essays for publication. As a published writer, her visual work is published in a number of books, including This Bridge Called My Back, Writings by Radical Women of Color. It's on its 4th edition. Anzaldua and Moraga editors, and in Lesbian Art in America, a contemporary history by Harmony Hammond. And before we sign off at the end, I will make sure that Happy you will know how to find her, where to view her art, and you will have access to reaching out to her at your desire. So we're going to get started.
I'm glad to be here. This is exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I love to ask people is, at this point in your life, what is it that truly matters the most to you? What's of most importance?
Interesting. Well, I've always felt that all I wanted was to be comfortable, which to me meant that I could do what I needed to do and wanted to do at the time. I'm not very extravagant unless I have those moments of extravagance when I can. Um, and recently I took a trip back east. Well, oh, okay. So I'm in Mendocino, California right now, which is 3.5 hours north of San Francisco. And I moved 6 years ago. So a few months ago, I spent a few weeks there. And just a few weeks ago, I spent a month back east. And what I did in both places, it seemed, was connect with friends who have been friends for a long time. Some I hadn't seen in years, and some I hadn't had time to actually sit quietly with or sit for 2 or 3 hours at a stretch with. So I think deep friendships. And I was last November and December, I was with a friend who was passing away,
Mm.
who was extremely healthy, but her lungs were closing down. And I spent 2 months with her.
Mm.
And, that really brought it home how, when people are that close and that dear, how important it is to spend time with them whenever we can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's something that I think I have found as a common theme that, I think about my own life and all of the myriad things that I've done. And at the end of the day, kind of going, what really matters to me are my family, my friends, my relationships. Jobs come and go, cameras come and go, campuses come and go, all these things that really are not lasting, and not that friendships are, but the physical world of things that we get attached to. And there's so much change. But I have found that those relationships and the people that have been there my whole life, and it's even new friends,
Well,
that
and it's the
it
people we meet.
transcends.
Yeah, and it's the people we meet along the way through what we're doing.
Exactly.
I'm sure you have friends that through the dance world that you would never have met had you not been in that profession.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. The other question that I wanted to ask you is, what is it in terms of your voice and your vision being seen, heard, experienced in the world? What is it? I look and say, I'm doing these podcasts because what really matters to me is that that we break down barriers. And something that, you've said, like a world of peace where we are not out killing each other and at war in any way with each other. And how do we create, we're all in this together.
I know.
And how do we bridge all of those differences and stereotypes and biases? And that's really important to me. And I have committed my life as a transformational leader and a coach in being able to have people feel that they are at one with themselves, God or their higher power, whatever our belief is. And that's very much a guiding light for me. So maybe that's the question, is there a guiding light? And if there were, how would you articulate it?
To being in the world, simply?
With your art.
Well,
how do you use that?
No, I actually, I laugh occasionally because years ago I went to an astrologer.
Yeah.
And there have been different times when I've been really upset because no matter what I photograph, it's pretty beautiful. It's beautiful, old buildings, whatever. And she said to me, "Oh," she looked at this and your North Node and blah blah blah. And she said, "Oh, your job is to bring beauty into the world." And I said, "Oh, thank you," because I had been really upset about that.
I love it.
So I think that that's my job in a lot of ways. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the art, how you end up, meeting people and talking with people at openings, because that's when you have the most, interaction is sometimes at an opening, or if you're in a gallery and someone's there, you talk to them. But sometimes I think the interactions have nothing to do with my actual work, although my work might have brought the person to me.
I love it.
because often the conversations are totally different, or they're about being creative. Oftentimes it's about being creative, and sometimes people need permission
Mm.
to be creative in their lives, or to accept that what they're doing is creative.
I always take notes, by the way.
Right.
I wrote that down, by the way, that
Okay. That's
that
okay.
there's, how much I wonder with art, and especially, part of this, part of what this whole podcast series is about, is that we pigeonhole ourselves in the world of fine art. And how many people, and I used to work with kids, and they would say, well, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative. I love how you said, it's my work brings people to me. I think that there's just the perception and the complexity of creativity and imagination, and the perceptions of fine art. And people say, well, I'm not an artist. Well, because I don't, do oil on canvas, or I'm not a photographer, or whatever, versus whatever that energy is. And I've never heard anybody say it the way you did. That's why I'm pausing with it, is my work brings people to me. It's not about ego and identity. And there's always that, and you're in galleries and all of the public presentation, how do I get seen and how do I sell, the whole business side of being an artist, if one wants their work out and consumed in the world. But how much of that is the mindset of, no, my work resonates for the people for whom it resonates, for whom it's meant. Just the simplicity of that in the way that you said it.
I think people have this idea, and I had this idea. You were supposed to be in this gallery. You're supposed to do that. You're supposed to do whatever.
Mm.
And I got to a point at one point I was like, I want to sell my art. I don't need to be making hundreds, thousands of dollars on my work. Although I do have some pieces that cost that much because they're black and whites and they're vintage now, and they'll never be done again. And there's one. So there are those. But I think it's better to have them in people's homes.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean you undersell yourself.
Yes.
Because my work is not, well, smaller pieces are under $100. Some are under $50, but most are not. They range between $200 and $400, $500, unless they're vintage work, and then they can go up to $1,200 or more, depending on what it is. But I got that I wasn't going to do it in that way. I wasn't going to end up in those galleries, and it was fine.
But again, I think this is, as we're in this inquiry, this is, what is it? I just think all of the perceptions of, as a dancer, as a young dancer, there was a trajectory to end up being the prima ballerina at the New York City Ballet. That wasn't my path. Okay, that was not the path. And then I looked and said, but there's something here for me to express. So how, as a creator, do I create the platform or the environment if that's not the direction or the choice that I want to go? And I think one of the things that I really find that's fascinating to me is the academic, I'm going to call it like academic snobbery, and looking at contemporary art and people that don't have that pedigree or that, school or this or that. And they're gifted artists, and some of the challenges that people go through. And I think it's a metaphor when we're a little different. Different can translate in a lot of different ways. But when our pathway has not been the traditional approved of track, and then how do we not let that take us out? And that's what I hear. How did you come to this work? How did you, because I'm not a photographer.
Okay.
Right, I still have like a little Kodak, and I think that I'm visual, but it ain't my thing. So I am just fascinated. So will you share with us the story?
Yeah, there of course is a story, I guess. Yeah, the story's funny. Well, I still have photographs from when I was 9 years old. The one roll of film I took with my father's camera, the Brownie, of course, on a school trip, looking over the edge down at this water, and that's I still have those, and I saw them just recently. I got my first camera in 1969. So cameras accessible. I always would take pictures with a little Brownie with my knees would end up in the picture. I couldn't get the picture I wanted. And then I was in San Francisco in 1969. I was at Altamont. I took some photographs with a friend's 35 millimeter camera and saw that, I could take these photographs. It was fabulous. I went into work and I mentioned it to the right person. And this woman said, "Oh, my husband is at the Art Institute and he's selling a Nicormat camera with a 105 millimeter lens." I was like, okay, whatever. So, so it turned out it was perfect for me because it's a portrait lens.
Okay.
So I did a lot of portraits at the time, and the length was good for architectural work too. So I worked with that for a while. It was stolen, and then I ended up with a Hasselblad camera, which is a 2¼ negative camera. It's a medium format, weighs about somewhere between 7 and 9 pounds. So I didn't carry it a lot, but it's what honed my eye on a square, and what really made me I focused differently with it than with a 35 millimeter. I got to be a snob because Hasselblads were taken to the moon.
Okay.
And I used it handheld. I didn't use a tripod. It's heavy enough for a tripod. Most people do use a tripod with it. I would do that when I did portraits, because then you can sit it there and not have to, know where you are when you go and, brush a little hair back or something. But
so did the camera guide you to portraits? Because you said that the camera was a great camera.
No, I did some with the 35 millimeter. I always did some. You've got it. I don't know. Sometimes I think I would have been more experimental with a 35 millimeter because they're lighter. You could do different things. Or this made me be very serious.
And I'm assuming you do all of your own. Do you do like a darkroom development?
I did. Oh, not anymore.
Okay.
Not anymore. And had I actually understood that I could have had someone else do it, I would have, because I liked doing darkroom. I liked seeing the original image, but I really didn't like darkroom work, guys. A lot of people love it and would get lost in the darkroom for hours, and there were occasionally when I would do that, but I just liked a crisp print. So I didn't need to do that, except that in the 1970s, if you didn't do it all, you weren't really a photographer. You had to do it all. You had to. So I always considered the Life magazines in the 1950s and 60s as those photographers as my mentors. And actually, I have a friend here whose father was a Life photographer, and she's an excellent photographer up here. So photography just was my medium. It came to me. I still would like to paint, and who knows if I ever will. And sometimes I think I'm done photographing, and then I have the camera with me, and something really gets me seriously moving and thinking and photographing. So who knows? It's been about 53 years that I've been photographing. And it's not an easy medium because everybody has a camera. And now everybody has a camera on their phone. And so everybody's always photographing, they're always shooting. And so I always call it digital images.
Yes.
So I just changed, I don't call them photographs because they're different. And sometimes people will say, "Well, did you Photoshop that?" And I say, "Well, yes, I did, because that's how I get my photos onto my laptop and then into the printer. Yes, I use a program, but I think it's It's just a tool. It's only a tool. It's a dark room in the computer, and it doesn't work the way a dark room does in the computer. You get to do all this other stuff. So you get to paint and you get to do all this other work. So that's why I call them digital images. And I
Yeah.
do a lot of mandala kind of pieces with water
Mm.
and with trees. I like to do that kind. I just play a lot. It's one of the things I couldn't do in a dark. I've done in a dark room, but it's a lot more difficult.
As you're talking, there's so many, I keep thinking of like all these questions. One thing was, I think maybe one of the biggest things that fascinates me is as a photographer, because again, about visual perception, seeing the world through that lens. There's something, I don't know if you can comment about that, but there's something extraordinary. Again, when you're painting, painting any of those media, there, you're involved in it in a very different visual way than holding something. And and I'm one of those people, even with our phones, I just like, I'm not really good at composition. I don't know. I never like how my pictures are, even with all, I can push a button and I can move this here and I can move that there. Somehow how I visually process through that lens, I just never feel like it's representing. And that's what I've been struck by. So everybody, when I've seen pieces that have you sent me pictures of, and I look at them and I sit there going, how did you do that? Not functionally, how did you do that? But what is it in that, and is that like a visual gift? Or again, you're self-taught. So there's always the question, do we have a natural tendency to perceive a particular way, and then we find the vehicle or the vehicle finds us? So it's a long question, but it's really, how the hell do you see through that little thing and come up with what you do?
I get it. Well, most of my photographs I have done walking in the streets,
Oh my God.
and most have been architectural.
Okay.
So they aren't, and buildings, but they aren't a full building. They're a piece. And part of the thing with the Hasselblad is that everything is flipped. So when you look through the lens, everything is backwards, which I didn't even think about for years. And one day I was like, hey, everything, wait. But I didn't see it. I never saw it. As soon as I looked through the lens, I was looking through the lens. And it was a friend in a photo group years ago who taught photography, taught two things about, actually, this is her thing, was about color. If you take a color photograph just for the color, you'll be bored with the photograph. It won't be an image you really want around. It's just color. It doesn't. I like to have some kind of a context, even if I don't know what the context is, and it's some of it's symmetry or it's asymmetrical things. It's just. I have a photograph of this red building in San Francisco. It's the back of the building. It's red. It's got a black fire escape, and the windows have black around them, and most of them have white curtains. Mm-hmm. Most of the curtains are in one. I just like the contrast. Yeah. And then one of the curtains is pulled back. Mm. It just, boom, there's just one piece. And I learned that from a woman who became a friend who teaches, who I was in Detroit at the Arab American National Museum. I'm Lebanese, by the way, at the Arab American National Museum for an arts conference. And I had a portfolio, and Doris looked at it, and she came to one photograph and she started talking about it. And I was like, whoa, okay, I did that, huh? I saw that it's something that I did a lot with work in how I chose to photograph things. And it just was something I had honed and I started to do. It wasn't something I talked about because I didn't, artists don't talk, but we do. We learn how to talk. So, and when I get into what I learned was that if you want to really have I I don't crop.
Mm,
So everything I print pretty much, there's the occasional thing that I do, is full frame.
mm.
So to my mind and to what I've honed is that what I see through the lens, you have to take time to set it up, really look at it, what's on the edges. It was easier to do with the Hasselblad because of the weight. To
Mm.
me, it was steadier, to know where all my edges were, and I print to the edge, and I want it in a matte to the edge. I want to see the whole thing because that's what I took.
And I don't know if this is accurate. It sounds that the way your process is, especially I'm imagining, and there's the picture you have from Chinatown that you'd sent me, and just imagining a building. And again, I have an art history background, so I studied architecture, all of that. And imagining, it's almost as if you crop it, like the picture you just described with the shutters. It's almost as if your eye is so trained that you can isolate it within the architecture and you crop it as you're taking the picture. So you don't have to go back and crop it from a big picture.
So you
Already cropped it.
so it's not as so.
Is that accurate, the way you described it?
It is the words are inaccurate. So
Good, tell me the right words.
You're framing your image. You're framing your image on your negative. So what you see is what you're framing. Cropping would be when you cut it, if you cut it after that. So the idea is right. I would just say framing instead of cropping.
Thank you. So I'm going to say it again. So what I heard you say was, rather than taking that, the way you have trained your eye is you are able to go in and isolate on a big building, a particular area, and you literally in your mind's eye frame that image, and your photograph is that,
right,
rather than the bigger image. But it's the way that you process it. I don't know how to say it, but thank you for correcting me. But I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's like something will catch my attention, and I will turn around and go, oh. I mean, I've actually walked by things and turned around not knowing why I was turning around. And there are those times when you look through the lens and you know that this is it. This is a photo. This is one that's special. It's better than good and it's better than interesting. It just is. And those times are, those are exquisite.
And having part of this whole conversation is so much to me about creativity. It's really a metaphor. And I think that's part of my intention, is that it's, it's going to say, what's your inspiration? I walk around in my world and I see things that other people are I don't even want to say that they're missing.
It's true. I did a show, and I was in an exhibit, and on one night I had all these friends come, and it was an installation, and their reaction to the installation was really interesting and different from what I'd had. And I also had all these images, and two friends said they walked home and they looked up and they saw things on buildings they'd walked by hundreds of times that they hadn't seen, because I photograph up pretty much all the time, because I really don't want to get the cars and the people.
Okay. I love it.
So the Chinatown, when I was moving out of San Francisco after 48 years, I used to walk up to North Beach because a friend of mine played at the saloon on Tuesdays. So I would put my boots on and walk from where I lived. And this time I walked through Chinatown knowing that I may not get the chance to do that again. And I walked the whole length. In fact, the photo you saw was one of the first ones. And I walked the whole length, and I get to the end, and a woman walked by me, an old Chinese woman who was bent over. And she kind of looked at me, and she looked up and looked back at me. And I went over to her and showed her the photos. And all the photos I took, since they were up, was what she saw all the time in her daily life, because when she looked up, that's when she talked to someone, that's what she would see. So we had a laugh, and she went on, and I went on, and I just loved it. That was great. That was one of my favorite moments, photo people moments.
One of the things that just struck me, by the way, was when you said, you would show people your photographs, or they'd say, oh my God, I never saw that before. And it's all of those things that are right in front of us that we're either not looking for or we're busy looking at something else. That again, this is kind of in the spirit of this is the time of your life. How many things are there that are just hidden from our view, even though they're right in full view in front of us? And that as a photographer, you're pulling back the curtain, as it were, on those things that are not hidden from our view, that are really truly there to be appreciated and enjoyed, and that you capture that. I just think, again, to me, it's just a great metaphor. And I think, one of the other things was when I said to you, like, what's, the inspiration? I love, someone that I interviewed said her inspiration is people's story. So they tell a story about somebody. They'll tell her story, and then she paints their story.
Oh,
My dad was a muralist, and a lot of times and he was a commercial muralist and a commercial artist. So a lot of times his inspiration for things was a theme from a business, because it was a business thing. Or when he would sit and he would just do his own drawings, a lot of times he loved nature, and so it was water scenes. And he did motif number 1 and number 2 in Gloucester. I don't even know how many times.
I photographed motif.
Oh my God.
I did. And I didn't know it was motif number 1 until someone was looking at it and said, oh, this is motif number 1. I was like, what the?
What does that mean? Right. But I love, I think that I just have an appreciation of what it is as a photographer. That it is just, it is to me, it's just a whole other way of relating to the world and seeing and bringing that. Is there anything else that that you would want to share? Just, because again, my orientation is more dance. It's much more visual art, painting, canvas, sculpture. It's more tactile and kinesthetic, where, photography to me is just a very different medium.
Right.
And one of the other things, by the way, the beauty right now, and I think about again in this conversation about creativity, the beauty of portability, that everybody's got a cell phone. People have, no matter how old they are, peewees that are running around taking pictures at 4.
I know.
Right? Multi-generational opportunity. And you'll get, so given that you were East Coast, so we were on Cape Cod at the beach yesterday. We went for a beach walk, and there were a group of young women in their bikinis screenshotting, doing all their photographs at the beach, and we were laughing like, okay, there they go to Instagram. It is this world of photography is so different, and the accessibility, but it is as a creative expression. I hadn't thought about it until this part of the conversation. As a creative expression, it is something that is available, whether you're a teeny tiny or no matter how old. If you can hold up that thing and look through this, look through the lens, you can capture and create. I'm fascinated, with like, how did you learn the transitional technology, cropping, like all of that? Because that's a process which you didn't start with.
It's really not that hard.
But that's good for people, but that's good for people to know. It's not that hard.
I got a laptop when I went to Jordan, because I had been to Beirut a few years before for the first time, and I had for the first time a small digital camera with me, which I actually used more than the Hasselblad, but it was the last time I used the Hasselblad was in Beirut, on a pier at the Mediterranean. The the programs that are in computers that you translate your photo. I think the thing that's not happening is most people aren't printing anything. So, we had very few photos when we were kids. Now
Right.
people have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos. Every time they turned around, there was a camera in front of them, or in their hand. But people aren't printing. I think people need to print special photos, not everything, because no one can print everything. To me, the difference with the digital was I had, so with the Hasselblad, I had 12 shots on a roll of film.
Okay. That doesn't sound like many.
It's not a lot.
My Kodak had 35, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. I would go out for a day to shoot specifically in the Bay Area, or in my favorite place was Kehoe Beach, things like that. And I would take a finite number of rolls with me.
Okay.
And when I traveled, I could travel for 3 weeks to a month and be somewhere and come home with 300 negatives. So then I travel with a digital camera, and you come home for that same amount of time with 3,000. So that's the basic difference to me, was that I wasn't held to a finite number of anything, unless I, ran out of energy, or ran out of whatever it's called in the camera, ran out of juice, or ran out of space on a card and not have another one. Those are the only reasons why you stop with a digital. And with a digital, with the Hasselblad, I would often take only one shot. So a lot of my old photos are there was one shot, because I really set it up. Sometimes I'd walk away.
Right.
And say, this isn't working. But with a digital, you tend to take more work. You take more pictures of the same thing, a half inch here and a third of an inch there, and fourth ups, whatever, up and down, or move around a little more. It's got that ability. But I oftentimes, so personally, one of the things that I've been doing is going out and saying, you have one roll of film and it's got 12 shots on it.
Mm.
So be really discerning on what I was taking. So I will do that sometimes, because I just don't want to do more than that. And I still will just take one shot. So
it's, and it really is fascinating. I love, growing up with pictures, and now everything being digital, and then taking pictures. And I have multi-generational collections of family pictures. It's kind of when my mom passed away, and her family, and my dad's, and there's this whole, and we always think, wow, we should really just take pictures of everything and download it. And I'm still I like the tactile. I love looking at, there's something about that experience, the kinesthetic of it. Say a little bit more about, was the trip to Beirut, was that family history, or what was the impetus? You said you're Lebanese, so was that part of it?
It was, a couple of things. First of all, yes, I am Lebanese. I have never been to Beirut. I'd never been to Lebanon. I'd had hardly traveled. And I worked on a book called Berid Mistajel that came out of Beirut, and it was oral histories or oral stories that were done by a group called Meme.
Okay.
And Meme was a group for lesbian and bi women questioning. They had free counseling. They had a space in Beirut. They were wonderful. I'm sure they're all still activists somewhere. And they put together this book. I went to a group meeting in Oakland and ended up directing a staged reading of the book. And what we did is I had everybody read all the stories and give me their 5 favorites. And that was from the people who were working on production end, the women working on production end, the women who were going to read, because I just asked for volunteers and got 9 readers. So, okay, we're going to have 9 readers. And every story that came up with 4 or 5 was instantly in. Then I went to the 3s and the 2s, and some I took pieces out of. And we did this stage reading. And I just got involved differently with a whole group of people. And then I worked for the census, and I decided to go to Beirut.
So you did go to Beirut, right?
I did go to Beirut. And I went up and I stayed with a couple of different friends. And I went to the mountains and found my cousins. Took
That's
this
so
to
great.
the mountains. It was a wonderful, wonderful trip. And I photographed there a lot. And I have some just exquisite photos from Beirut that I love. And I printed them on rag paper. And now those are vintage, not for their age, but because my printers just won't print on rag anymore. So I have this one or two sets. That's all of those. And I'm printing them now on bamboo paper. So I print
Wow.
on a bamboo paper that I love because it's got a little bit of texture, and a watercolor paper mostly. So I don't know how that started or ended. So, but Beirut, I photographed every day. I was out shooting every day for 3 or 4 weeks. So that was real special.
I'm just kind of like imagining you with your camera. You
Oh,
know.
and my hair was longer. I mean, my hair is long and white, and my Beiruti sisters, so to speak, were all dyed and coiffed, and no one bothered me. I walked around. By the time the end of the day came, my hair was like this big.
Oh my goodness. All right. So happy.
Yes.
We've been to Beirut. We've been to the book. We kind of know where it started when you were 9 was your brownie. So tell us, as the magnificent woman you are today, what are you doing and where do we find you? And what are you engaged in with your photography and galleries? And I think you and I had spoken that you also have been someone who represents others in galleries in California. So you've had a really diverse experience, not only as a hands-on artist and creator, but also supporting other creators. So would you catch us up?
Cool. Okay. So right now, I'm in Mendocino, California. Moving to Mendocino was very interesting because I walked in, joined the Arts Center when I was just here for 5 weeks, which got me to move here. I walked into the Arts Center, became a member, and put a piece in the show and got accepted in the members show. And so I walked in as an artist, and I was seen as an artist. It's an arts community. It has been since the 70s. So that to me was really fabulous. I had my own gallery for a minute. I was in a co-op gallery for 3 or 4 years. I can't even remember how long. And now my work is in different stores in the area. And I'm part of the Sister City exhibit with Japan. So I've been part of that for a few years. And that's going to be at the Art Center for a few months this summer, which I'm very much looking forward to. For my own work, I'm actually slowed down in the moment.
Okay.
One of the things I've been doing, I've been writing a lot more, seriously. And one thing I want to do is do more writing with my work. And to me, it's a fine line between putting writing on a photograph and having it still remain what I consider arty rather than a poster. Although there are many posters that are arty. I mean, I don't want to denigrate posters. I'm just, but that's one of the things I've been thinking of.
Yeah.
And there's a place in Fort Bragg, which is right up the road, 12 miles up the road, where I can rent a letterpress. So one of the things I've been thinking about doing is doing my words with a letterpress onto photographs, digital images that have been printed on a rag paper or a bamboo paper, or and doing embossing or doing something to change the change the flat surface of a photograph. So that's one of my ideas. But doing more work and more writing and having more writing on my work is one of the things I'm thinking about doing. A small book, just about the seasons on the headlands, but we'll see where that goes. I have a anyway, never mind.
Newsletter? Do you have a newsletter?
No. That's
Okay.
something else. If I had a secretary, or now we say administrative assistant, I'd be dangerous. As it is, I do not have a website. Um, I have an Instagram account because someone put one up for me, but I don't use it. And who knows when the website will come up again. I had one for years, but it's no longer. So
So if
the
people
only
want to
way,
find you,
yeah, the
what's
only way to
the
get a
best
hold of
way?
right, the only way to get a hold of me is by email.
Good. This is for everybody out there listening, by the way. All right. VAs, virtual assistants, Fiverr, all of that. Where someone who would want to, if, someone who would love to be engaged and involved in a project because they want to be engaged in creative activities, being a virtual assistant. Happy could maybe use somebody who could help her expand. So you're out there listening, we'll post her email. Seriously, the days of websites, we're in such transition with all of this. So who knows? There might be somebody out there who's like dying
Well,
as they
I
have
could,
time.
if someone I would love to work with someone on a website. So
Yeah.
there we have that.
So
So, so you
putting
can
that
find
out.
me the best way to reach me is through this email, LAHYDER, LA Hyder photography @gmail.com is the best way to reach me these days.
So as we wrap up, so I have a question. If there were a piece of advice that, in the spirit of creativity, aliveness, no matter how old we are. So I said, I've worked with 3-year-olds to 98-year-olds. So, creativity to me knows no age, no bounds, imagination, all of that. If there were a message that you would want to communicate, not only to your peers, and to us, but to your nieces, future generations, about keeping your spirit, the creative spirit, alive in you and the life force that courses through you, what would be a tip or a piece of advice you would give?
Great question. Let me think for a second. Well, one thing I often say is don't stop doing what you're doing. The things that you like to do, that you enjoy to do, just because you reached a certain number doesn't mean you have to stop doing it. You're probably not going to rappel off a rock at 80, or 70, but you might. I don't know. It's not something I would do. So, but if it's something you enjoy doing, just keep doing it.
So,
Because I love going out dancing. I love going out dancing. That's the worst thing of this pandemic, is that I wasn't able to go out dancing. I wouldn't go into San Francisco and go dance with my friends and see all these people. So that's the thing I've missed the most. But I love to go dancing, so I'm trying to dance around my house, my apartment. So that's it. That's my best.
But it's also at any point in time, because I think also what happens, and that's why the advice is such great advice, that we get so distracted at times, and then priorities may shift. And sometimes I think I have just found in my own life experience is, if I can keep doing what I love doing, that expands my joy, my energy. I'm a dancer. I'm like you. We don't go out dancing, but I dance around the house all the time. And I'm always I'm walking, I stay active, just how I relate. It's what I love to do. And because I keep doing what I love to do, it's amazing. I'm able to still keep doing what I love to do. Isn't it funny how that works? So that's pretty cool. And if there were one action that you could and would invite people to take over the next 24 hours, what might one action be that you would say, go do this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'd say call up a friend you haven't talked to in a while.
Okay.
And if it's someone you love, tell them you love them.
Great. Okay. So there's your assignment, everybody. Within
And
the
it,
next 24 hours, pick up the phone and call a friend, either someone you haven't spoken to in a while, or you could call somebody you have talked to, pick up the phone and let that person know that you love them. That's your homework assignment.
and I would add, encourage them on their path.
Perfect. That's two practices. These are great daily practices. Imagine what life would be like, by the way, if every day we picked up the phone and called somebody who we love and just told them, hi, there's that great song, Call to Say I Love You. It sounds corny, but it's really great. And encourage them to keep doing what they're doing and bring them encouragement and love. Imagine, one of the things that Happy shared with me is if she could have a magic wand and change anything, what she would change was that war would be obsolete, plain and simple. And imagine in a world where if every day what we did was we picked up the phone and we called somebody and appreciated them and told them that we love them and encouraged them, that might be part of the pathway to a world, plain and simple, where fighting and hatred and divisiveness and separation would not be the norm, but it would be obsolete. Thank you for joining the Art of Aliveness Chronicles with Annie B. I'm Ann Borow-Lawrence. Join us next time for more great interviews with inspiring artists, all backgrounds, shapes, and sizes, where we will be investigating just what is it that keeps people alive, vital, and vibrant in mind, body, and spirit throughout their lifetimes. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it with your friends. Please like the podcast series, and please do subscribe. With much love and gratitude, and see you the next time.